Officer Mike Donovan thought it was harmless fun when he turned the fire hose on the woman watering her garden, just a prank on a hot summer day. But when she calmly reached into her pocket and pulled something out, his smirk vanished. What happened next would end his career. The roses were Dr. Patricia Williams' pride and joy. Every morning at 6:30, she'd step out onto her front lawn in the quiet suburb of Riverside Heights, watering can in hand, tending to the garden that had become legendary in the neighborhood. At 68 years old, Trish, as her friends called her, moved with the deliberate precision of someone who'd spent 3 decades in military service. And her silver hair was cut short and practical. Her posture was ramrod straight, even in casual clothes. Everything about her spoke of discipline, dignity, and purpose. The neighbors knew her as the kind woman who brought cookies to newcomers and helped elderly residents with their groceries. They knew she was a veteran. The flag flying in her yard and the occasional uniform she wore to Memorial Day ceremonies made that clear. But most didn't know the full story. Inside her modest 2-bedroom home, the walls told tales that would humble anyone. Photographs in crisp frames showed a younger Patricia Williams in army dress uniform, standing with generals and senators. Medals were displayed in a shadow box above her fireplace. The Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, and a dozen others representing 30 years of service to her country. Colonel Patricia Williams had commanded troops in 3 war zones. She'd made decisions that saved lives and carried the weight of those that didn't. She'd been wounded twice and decorated for extraordinary valor under fire. After retirement, she'd become a tireless advocate for veterans' rights, testifying before Congress and helping establish support programs across the state. But she didn't talk about these things. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She'd done her service, and now she enjoyed the peace she'd fought to protect. This particular July morning was brutally hot, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt. Dr. Williams wore simple khaki pants and a faded army t-shirt, and her gardening gloves protecting hands that had once assembled rifles in the dark and signed orders that moved thousands of troops. She hummed softly as she adjusted the spray nozzle on her hose, giving her prize-winning roses the deep watering they needed to survive the heat wave. She had no idea her peaceful morning was about to be shattered. Officer Mike Donovan was having a good day. At 28 years old, he had just transferred to the Riverside Heights precinct after what he called personality conflicts at his previous assignment. His personnel file told a different story. Multiple complaints about aggressive behavior, disrespectful treatment of citizens, and a general attitude problem that his supervisors had barely tolerated. But Riverside Heights was a quiet suburb, and they needed officers. And Donovan had squeaked through with a clean enough record on paper, even if anyone who scratched the surface would have seen red flags everywhere. He drove his patrol car slowly through the tree-lined streets, one arm hanging out the window, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. This neighborhood was boring compared to his last assignment. Big houses, manicured lawns, people who probably never even got parking tickets. That's when he spotted her. An elderly black woman in her front yard, completely absorbed in watering her flowers. She looked small, fragile even, bent slightly as she adjusted her hose. The water caught the sunlight, creating tiny rainbows in the spray. Something about the scene irritated Donovan. Maybe it was the heat making him restless. Maybe it was his nature to see vulnerability as an invitation. Maybe it was something darker that he wouldn't have admitted even to himself. He noticed the fire hydrant maintenance equipment in his trunk, left over from a training exercise earlier that week. A coil of hose, an adapter wrench, all the tools needed to tap into a hydrant. A slow grin spread across his face. Just a little prank, he thought. Just some fun to break up the boring morning. These old folks in their perfect neighborhood needed to lighten up anyway. What was she going to do about it? Yell at him? He was the police. He could do whatever he wanted. He pulled the patrol car to a stop and popped the trunk. Dr. Williams was completely focused on her roses, checking each bloom for signs of stress from the heat. She didn't hear the patrol car stop, and she didn't notice Officer Donovan connecting the professional-grade hose to the fire hydrant 30 feet behind her. She was adjusting the spray on a particularly beautiful yellow rose when the blast hit her. The fire hose delivered water at a pressure designed to fight structural fires. The force nearly knocked her off her feet. The spray was so powerful, it tore petals from her roses and ripped her carefully mulched soil from around the roots. Her gardening hat flew off her head. Her clothes were instantly soaked through. The water was cold and relentless, pinning her in place for a moment before she managed to stumble backward out of the direct stream. Officer Donovan's laughter echoed across the quiet morning. He stood by the hydrant, one hand on the valve, the other holding his phone to record the moment. His amusement was loud and performative, the kind of laugh that said he'd found something hilarious and wanted everyone to know it. "Cooling off, Grandma?" he shouted over the sound of rushing water. "It's a hot one today." Across the street, Mrs. Chen dropped the newspaper she'd been retrieving from her driveway. 2 houses down, James Martinez stopped mowing his lawn, his mouth falling open in disbelief. A woman jogging past actually stopped running, pulling out her own phone. Dr. Williams stood there in her soaked clothes, water dripping from her hair, her face, her entire body. Her roses lay damaged around her feet. 20 years of careful cultivation, partially destroyed in seconds. The garden she'd tended every morning since retiring, the one thing that brought her peace after decades of war, ruined for someone's amusement. But she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't run or cower or react the way Donovan clearly expected. Instead, she reached down calmly and turned off her own garden hose. Then she straightened her posture, that old military bearing coming back automatically, and turned to face the officer directly. Her eyes were steel. Officer Donovan's laughter continued, but something in his chest tightened slightly as he watched the old woman's reaction. She wasn't acting right. Old people yelled when you pranked them. They got flustered and angry and embarrassed. That was the whole point. But this woman just stood there, water streaming off her clothes, staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even anger, it was something colder. Something that reminded him uncomfortably of the way his old drill sergeant had looked at him during basic training, right before destroying him with push-ups. Dr. Williams reached into her pocket slowly, deliberately. Her movements were controlled and precise despite her soaking wet clothes. Donovan's hand moved unconsciously toward his service weapon before he caught himself. She was just an old lady. What was she going to pull out? Some angry senior citizen ID card? But his laughter died in his throat when he saw what emerged from her pocket. A phone. Just a phone. But the way she held it, the way she looked at him as she unlocked it with her thumb, the absolute certainty in her movements. It sent a chill down his spine despite the July heat. The neighbors were gathering now. Mrs. Chen had come across the street. James Martinez stood at the property line, his face shocked and angry. The jogger was openly filming now, and Donovan realized with a start that she probably had been filming the whole thing. Dr. Williams scrolled through her contacts with the calm of someone who had all the time in the world. She found the number she wanted and pressed dial. She raised the phone to her ear and waited, water still dripping steadily from her clothes onto the ruined garden below. When someone answered, her voice was calm, clear, and carried the unmistakable tone of command. "This is Colonel Patricia Williams, service number 574883294. I need to speak with Chief Thompson immediately." The word colonel hit Donovan like a physical blow. His stomach dropped. There was a brief pause, then Dr. Williams continued. "Yes, I'll hold. Tell him it's Trish. He'll take the call." Officer Donovan's face had gone from amused to confused to genuinely pale. Colonel? This old lady gardening in khaki pants was a colonel? His mind raced. Maybe she was lying. Maybe she was confused. Old people got confused, right? But the confidence in her voice, the way she stood, despite being drenched, the precise way she'd recited that service number, those weren't the actions of someone confused or bluffing. "Marcus," Dr. Williams said into the phone, her voice warming slightly. "Yes, I'm fine. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm standing in my front yard, soaking wet, because one of your officers just turned a fire hose on me, and my garden is some kind of prank." Donovan could hear yelling through the phone from 6 feet away. Chief Thompson's voice was muffled but clearly furious. Yes, he's still here," Dr. Williams continued. "Young officer, late 20s, patrol car number 847. He's currently standing by my fire hydrant, looking like he just realized he made a significant mistake." She paused, listening. "No, I'm not hurt. But my roses are destroyed. And I'm standing here soaked to the bone while my neighbors watch one of your officers abuse his authority for entertainment." Another pause. Donovan wanted to run, to get in his car and drive away, but his feet seemed welded to the ground. "I appreciate that, Marcus. I'll wait here." Dr. Williams lowered the phone and looked directly at Donovan. "Chief Thompson is on his way. He says he'll be here in 10 minutes. He also says you're not to leave, and if you try, I'm authorized to take your badge number and vehicle information for a formal complaint." She said it without malice, just stating facts, the way a commanding officer might inform a private of the consequences of their actions. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "Officer, do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" Donovan's voice came out smaller than he intended. "Assaulted? It was just water. Just a joke." "That," Mrs. Chen said, pointing at Dr. Williams, "is a war hero. That is Colonel Patricia Williams. And you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The next 8 minutes felt like hours. Dr. Williams stood calmly in her ruined garden, occasionally wringing water from her shirt but otherwise maintaining her composure with military bearing. More neighbors had gathered, and forming a loose circle around the scene. James Martinez approached Donovan, his face tight with controlled anger. "Do you know what you've done?" "Look, I didn't know she was—" Donovan started. "Didn't know she was what, human? Deserving of respect?" James cut him off. "Let me educate you about your victim, officer. That woman served 30 years in the United States Army. 30 years. She commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. She has a Silver Star for valor. Do you even know what that means?" Donovan's throat was too dry to answer. Mrs. Chen joined in, her voice sharp. During her second deployment, Colonel Williams led a rescue operation that saved 43 soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. She took shrapnel to her leg and kept going for 6 more hours until everyone was safe. That's why she walks with a slight limp that you probably didn't notice because you didn't bother to see her as a person. After she retired, James continued, she spent 5 years testifying before Congress about veteran health care. She helped pass legislation that provides mental health services to thousands of soldiers. She personally counseled over 100 veterans through PTSD and suicide prevention programs. The jogger, who'd been recording everything, spoke up. "I'm a reporter for the Riverside Journal. I interviewed Colonel Williams last year for Veterans Day. She's personal friends with the police chief, the mayor, 2 state senators, and a congressman. She's received commendations from 3 different governors." Donovan felt like he might vomit, and each new piece of information was another nail in the coffin of his career. "She volunteers at the VA hospital every Tuesday," Mrs. Chen added. "She runs a scholarship fund for children of fallen soldiers. She donated $50,000 to rebuild the community center after the fire." "And you," James said, his voice dropping to barely controlled fury. You decided to spray her with a fire hose for fun. You humiliated a woman who served this country with honor, while you abused the badge you don't deserve to wear. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching fast. Dr. Williams checked her watch calmly. 8 minutes. Marcus always was punctual. 3 patrol cars and Chief Thompson's personal vehicle came screaming around the corner, lights flashing but sirens cutting off as they approached. Chief Marcus Thompson emerged from his car before it had fully stopped. A tall black man in his 50s with the same military bearing as Dr. Williams. He strode directly to her, and before anyone could say a word, he stood at attention and rendered a crisp salute. Colonel Williams, he said formally. Then his face softened. Trish, I am so sorry. Dr. Williams returned the salute out of habit, then waved it off. At ease, Marcus. We're not in uniform. The hell we're not, Thompson growled, gesturing at his police uniform. I'm always representing service, same as you always did. And this... He turned to look at Donovan, his eyes blazing. This is a disgrace to everything that uniform is supposed to mean. He addressed Donovan directly. Officer Donovan, body camera. Now. Chief, I can explain, Donovan started. I didn't ask for an explanation. I gave you an order. Body camera footage. Download it to the unit in Car 3 immediately. 2 other officers appeared at Donovan's elbows, not quite touching him, but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. Chief Thompson turned to the assembled neighbors. Did anyone witness what happened here? 5 hands went up. 3 people held up phones with video. I'll need statements from all of you and copies of any footage. He pulled out a card and handed it to the reporter. Send everything to Internal Affairs at this email address. Consider this an official investigation as of right now. He turned back to Dr. Williams, his professional mask slipping to show genuine concern. Trish, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? I'm fine, Marcus. Wet, annoyed. That and my roses are ruined, but I'm fine. Your roses? Thompson looked at the destroyed garden and his jaw clenched. 30 years you served. You ask for nothing. You live quietly. And this is how you're treated in your own community by someone who's supposed to protect you. He turned back to Donovan. Apologize. Now. Officer Donovan's mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought it was just... You thought it was just what? Chief Thompson's voice was ice. Just harmless? Just funny? Just an old black woman who wouldn't matter? The words hung in the air, the unspoken truth that everyone was thinking, but the chief had the courage to say out loud. Internal Affairs will begin a full investigation today, Thompson continued. You're suspended without pay effective immediately. Badge and service weapon. Now. Donovan's hands shook as he unclipped his badge and unholstered his weapon, handing them over to one of the other officers. Your previous department records are being requested as we speak, Thompson added. Every complaint, every incident, every warning you received. This wasn't your first abuse of power, was it, Donovan? It wasn't. As the investigation would later reveal, Donovan had 7 formal complaints at his previous department, and twice that many informal ones. He'd been transferred rather than disciplined, a problem passed along rather than solved. Dr. Williams spoke for the first time since the chief arrived. Marcus, I don't want this to be just about punishing him. I want policy changes. And I want every officer in this department to understand that the badge is a responsibility, not a license for cruelty. Chief Thompson nodded. You'll have it. In fact, I'd like you to help design the new training program, if you're willing. I'm willing. By that evening, the story had broken across local news. By the next morning, it was national. The video of a police officer spraying an elderly veteran with a fire hose for amusement went viral, generating millions of views and widespread outrage. The department was flooded with calls demanding accountability. The mayor held a press conference apologizing to Dr. Williams personally. State legislators called for investigations into police transfer policies that allowed problem officers to simply move to new departments. Donovan's world was collapsing, but one consequence at a time, all stemming from a moment when he'd thought himself untouchable. 2 weeks later, the formal hearing was held. The conference room was packed with department brass, union representatives, internal affairs investigators, and members of the press. Officer Mike Donovan sat alone at a table, his lawyer beside him. He looked smaller than he had that July morning, diminished by the weight of his actions and their consequences. The evidence was overwhelming. His body camera footage showed everything. The deliberate decision to connect the hose, the laughter, the callous disregard for Dr. Williams's dignity. Witness statements were consistent. The videos from neighbors' phones had been viewed millions of times online, but the final nail came from his previous department's records. As a pattern emerged, disrespect toward citizens, particularly minorities and the elderly, abuse of authority, a sense of entitlement that had been noted but never properly addressed. The verdict was unanimous: immediate termination. His police certifications were revoked. He would never work in law enforcement again. But before he left, Dr. Williams asked to address the room. She stood with quiet authority, still in civilian clothes but carrying herself like the colonel she'd once been. "I didn't request this hearing for revenge," she began. "I requested it because power without accountability is tyranny. A badge without integrity is just a piece of metal." She looked directly at Donovan. "You saw an elderly woman in her garden and decided she was beneath your respect. You made that decision based on assumptions about my age, and my race, my perceived powerlessness. You were wrong on all counts, but here's the thing. You shouldn't have needed me to be a colonel for me to deserve basic human dignity." Her words cut deeper than any formal punishment could. Every person in this community deserves respect. The homeless veteran, the single mother, the teenager walking home from school. They all deserve to be treated with dignity by those sworn to protect them. The badge means service, not superiority. She turned to the chief. "Use this as a teaching moment. Make sure every officer knows that their actions have consequences and that power demands humility, not arrogance." Donovan could barely meet her eyes as he offered his final apology. This time it was genuine, but it was far too late. 3 months later, the changes were real and measurable, and the department had implemented what became known as the Patricia Williams Act, a comprehensive reform package addressing use of force policies, accountability measures, and mandatory training on respect and implicit bias. Every officer had to complete 40 hours of community engagement and learn the histories of the neighborhoods they served. Dr. Williams taught several sessions herself, sharing her experiences and reminding officers that every person they encountered had a story, had value, had dignity that deserved protection. Her garden had been restored by community volunteers, who showed up one Saturday morning with new roses, fresh mulch, and determination to repair what had been destroyed. It was more beautiful than ever. Mike Donovan was working at a warehouse, loading trucks for minimum wage. Yet his police career was over. His reputation was destroyed. He'd lost his apartment, his girlfriend, and the respect of everyone who'd once known him. The video of his actions would follow him forever, a digital scarring that no amount of time could erase. Dr. Williams continued her quiet life of service. She still watered her roses every morning. She still volunteered at the VA hospital. She still showed up for her community in countless small ways that never made the news. But now, every officer who drove past her house knew exactly who she was. More importantly, they knew what she represented. The idea that respect isn't negotiable, that dignity isn't determined by rank or status, and that true power lies not in what you can do to others, but in how you choose to treat them. One moment of cruelty had exposed a broken system. But one woman's dignity, composure, and commitment to change had helped fix it. The badge she'd taught them was earned through service, and respect was given freely to all, or it meant nothing at all.